Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. The black cloth's out, must be 2021 Project Orchids time, and this will be the last part of update 1 effectively. I mean each update consists of 4 parts. This is part 4, endearingly known as the others. Which, quite honestly, in all good faith, when these plants were selected, I was expecting things to happen with them. Well, some of the things that have happened are not so expected. So this has ended up being not a very good selection of plants, quite honestly. Not quite sure what to do with it, but we'll have a think about it at the end when I've filmed the individual parts and done the words over the photographs from the initial look video. The info card that will come up around now will be for the initial look of part 4, so if you want to sort of click on that, you can pause this video and go away and watch that if you actually missed it. That was filmed back in March. Now 3 months later we will go ahead and go back to those stills that were taken then and have a look at them and a chat about what the plants look like at that particular point, and then I'll video the plants as they are today. It's going to be fun in one particular case, and we'll go from there. Right, let's get on with plant number 1. Okay then, back in March when we looked at the Coelogyne, nitida or nitida, however you want to say it. Used to be Orchids, but it's been renamed sometime now. We ought to be using the new name. What we were looking at is a very badly desiccated plant that had virtually lost its root system. Reason being, the media had started to go over, and at a point when the plant wasn't growing, it was just staying too wet. So basically it had been repotted at this particular point. It was in a mix of bark, cocoa husk and charcoal, and it was sitting there doing, well, very little, next to nothing basically. 2 tiny growth-like appearances, one in the middle of the plant, one at the front of the plant, barely visible, and they had been sitting there like that, doing nothing for some time. And the way this plant, I believe, grows is those should turn into flower spikes, and once the bloom's finished they carry on and produce a pseudobulb with leaves, but at the moment they're not doing any of it. So what we've got is a desiccated plant. The leaves aren't bad, but it's not moving. So hopefully as we get into the growing season something might change, something might actually happen, but if it doesn't grow any roots soon it hasn't got a long-term future. So let's see how we got on with that one. Okay, as far as this first one is concerned, on the surface it doesn't seem to have changed at all. The bulbs are still incredibly desiccated. The leaves haven't really changed much, but what we have got is the 2 growths, I'll call them growths. The one in the middle of the plant has at least doubled in size, if not trebled in size, and the one at the front has grown bigger, but that's all I can say. What I can't do is remember how this one grows, because some Coelogynes have got a strange growth pattern where what looks like a new growth ends up being a spike, and then after the flowers finish it actually turns into a growth and grows its pseudobulb and leaves. And at some point in that process there will be roots, because at the moment this plant is virtually rootless, and it's also used up all of its resources, hence the total desiccation of the bulbs, but it is managing to support its leaves. So far so good. If these growths, which are now starting to extend, do attempt to flower, I will take the flowers off and just hope that the growth continues, leaves are produced, and somewhere down the line roots are produced. If that can happen, the plant will be fine. If not, then it's not going to last a huge amount of time with literally no roots and no stored energy. It's surviving on photosynthesis at the moment. That's about all it's got, which is not enough to support it long term, and that, generally speaking, on its own doesn't support much in the way of growth. So all I can do is hope that these growths, they are extending, which means something is happening now. I don't know what. So that's as far as we've got with that one. Now, back in March, the Psychopsis was virtually a no hope. It had been on a mount and not done anything at all. It started the very beginnings of a new growth in the leaf joint. So at the base of the flower spike, slightly to the right, is a tiny distorted leaf, followed by a larger twisted leaf with a little point sticking out. That was all it had going for it, was that tiny new growth, and no real path for any roots to get down into the media. It had no roots. The roots on it were not viable. So it was a rootless Psychopsis that needs good hydration, warmth and humidity. So I don't think there was a lot of hope for this, and I was probably sort of reading that into the way we were looking at it in March. But given, you know, the cocoa husk, it was being given a chance. This is another one where there's been virtually no progress. When we looked at this in March, I did say that it had no roots. It was making no effort to grow any roots, and the new growth it was producing was in a leaf joint, so it was still not producing any roots. And quite honestly, that's still the state of play. This new growth is not progressing, and the leaves are now, I think, probably beyond hope. So I think this plant is actually dead. It's showing no signs of life whatsoever. As I said, I mean, you know, it's been 3 months and that growth hasn't really extended more than about, well, a centimetre at the absolute most. These leaves are totally desiccated. They have no life in them whatsoever. So I think, although the plant's not in my way, it's serving no purpose. I don't believe it's ever going to successfully grow, because even if this growth started to push on and did manage to get some roots down from here into the pot, these leaves are not going to get any better. They are lost, which leaves me with a growth with one leaf. That's not really a plant. And bearing in mind my environment is not really that suitable for these because of the low temperatures in the winter, it's too late in the year for that to get itself into a state to survive another winter. So I think I'm going to declare this gone and actually remove it from my site. So we won't be seeing this one next time round. Now, the Sarchochilus hybrid, to all intents and purposes, sort of was okay, but it wasn't really. Even though it had managed to push up a flower spike, a Sarchochilus spike with 2 blooms on is not a major success. It's basically showing the weakness of the plant. And although the plant's got green leaves on it, there's not enough, and it hasn't got the basal growths going for it. It hasn't got a very good root system. So all I could say about this in March was it was surviving, and it probably wasn't the best of ideas to let it bloom if I intended to grow it on. But at this particular point in time, I was worried about all 3 Sarchochilus, and I was still debating what to do about them, especially as 2 of them were gifts originally, including this one. But if I keep them, they might not have a future. So what did we do? Right, we're doing well here, aren't we? Plant number 1 was making a pretty feeble effort at trying to recover, but at least it was making a small amount of effort. We went to plant number 2 and decided to scrap it. And this is plant number 3. It has ceased to be. Now that's not as sad as it may sound. At the end of the day, my Sarcochilus were not growing. They were going downhill at a rate of knots such that I didn't think I was going to be able to keep them much longer. They just didn't grow well in this environment. And as we all know, Lynn grows spectacular Sarcochilus, and the two hybrids that I had, including this project plant, she didn't have. And I thought, well, what better place to put them to survive than with a friend who grows them incredibly well. So as far as our project plants are concerned, it has ceased to be. Still, at least we saw the blooms. It was in bloom last time we looked, but that was as good as it was ever going to be, and that was a very, very poor spike. It wasn't growing very well at all, and I hope it's doing a lot better in its new home. So basically, as far as a 6-plant project is concerned, we've just scrapped one, and one's gone to a friend. So we're now down to 4. I may do something about that. But let's move on to the next one. Yes, I know the black cloth's gone. I put everything away and realised I'd forgotten one, and I'm not getting it all back out again just for one plant. The plant looks the same whether it's got a bit of black cloth under it or not. And this was the mounted Bulbophyllum. And last time we looked at this, it was doing very well. In fact, any time you look at this, since I've had it, it's been doing okay, which is a little surprising on a mount because it does dry right out in between waterings, which for a Bulbophyllum is not natural. They are supposed to stay at least moist. But this has basically finished growing for the season now. So, you know, what I've got on the plant is what I've got on the plant. There won't be any new growth for a while now, but what I'm hoping, I don't know whether you're going to be able to see this or whether I can get the plant at the right angle, is that things like that are actually the start of spikes. I don't know whether that's a new one or an old one. Well, it's a new growth, so in theory that's a spike. So I think we might have some spikes starting again up in there. There looks like there might be one. They are tiny. They are very, very difficult to see until they progress. But yeah, I mean, that is the next logical thing that this should do, is to actually come into bloom. So hopefully we will see some blooms on this soon. There isn't much else to say about this. This is growing well on its mount. It seems to like it. As it progresses in its various directions, for instance the growth at the top, any subsequent growths now are either going to go over the top or become aerial, which I don't really want. This growth here should still enable, you know, if this bit extends, it should still enable roots to get down. But in some cases it has grown aerial roots, and they do seem to make their way down into the moss, you know, and some have even gone round the back of the mount. And then the lower section has got several places where it will extend as well, including one section that's very, very tight to the mount. So that will certainly attach some more roots. So I'd say this is growing okay. It was one that did I get given it? Yes, I think it got given to me at some point. Can't remember where, it's too long ago. And it was misnamed, which wasn't actually discovered until it bloomed, and then the blooms were just not right. So we spent quite a long time with some help to actually find out what the hell it actually was. And I'm pretty confident now that this is actually named correctly. I mean, the trouble is when you look up the species and you look up the images for the blooms, you can see it's very variable. And when you get something that's very variable, and then there's another one that's quite similar that's very variable, you will get some images from both plants that are virtually identical as far as the blooms are concerned. So you still don't really know. But I'm accepting the name I've got at the moment, and I'm happy with the way this is progressing. There's no way this won't be here next time, despite getting missed out of the filming. Anyway, it's here, it's doing well, and it should bloom very soon. And we'll see what, I'll say there'll be videos about the blooms when they occur. I doubt if they'll still be there next time we film in September. They're going to actually produce spikes and bloom before then, I suspect. Anyway, doing okay despite being on a mount. Now this Renanthera was in a state of recovery to a degree. The base of the plant, the bit with most of the roots on, got some rot, and it was quite bad, and it looked like it was spreading. So I took the bull by the horns and cut the plant off just below the roots that you see there, which left me with one root, but it got rid of the rot. And then I decided that I would put it in some sphagnum moss, damp moss, up to the base of the first leaf, incorporating some of the stem and the base of this root, which should keep the plant hydrated. But very slow progress, no real progress quite honestly, apart from the fact that the top had carried on growing incredibly slowly through the winter months with the cool temperatures, which for a Renanthera is a bonus. Most of them like warmth, and at best are intermediate towards the top end. But the leaves were green, there was an element of growth at the top, it had one root, and I'd cured the, well, I wouldn't say cured the rot, I cut it off. That's not exactly a cure. Bit dramatic for a cure. Anyway, let's see where we've got to with this one. Okay, so the Renanthera is making some progress, but not of the sort I want, because basically it has got top growth. I mean, last time we looked at this, there were 5 leaves on the left, including a very small one near the top, and 4 on the right, including a very small one. Well, obviously this leaf has grown on quite a bit, and this one's still growing. So we've got top growth. The single root has extended a bit, and it still has a growing tip, but what it hasn't done is shot out from the stem. There are no new roots, so it still has one single root. Now I don't know what to do with this for the best. I keep thinking I ought to take it out and mount it so that it's got some live moss, you know, sort of around the base of the plant and partially up the stem. That way, because this stays wet, because it's not getting used. So, you know, there's possibility of rot setting into the stem. Whereas if it was put on a mount, it would dry on a daily basis just in the environment. And it would get some air around it as well. But there's no sign of branching on this, even in the moss, where you'd think it might do. So it's difficult to say what to do with it. It's not going downhill. Yeah, as I said, the leaves are still progressing. And it's very slow, but then it's surviving on one root, most of which is aerial. Now, aerial roots for a Renanthera are not out of order. You know, a lot of them are grown bare-rooted. But yeah, I mean, perhaps, you know, those still watching, wondering whether there are any plants left in this part 4, perhaps might make some suggestions. You know, somebody who's grown a few Renantheras and perhaps had some problems, but basically the stem rotted. It was in a bad way, and the only way to save the plant was to cut that section off, which was just below this last remaining root, which is showing no effort at branching whatsoever. I mean, it's probably doubled in length. But that's the state of play. Top growth is still there. It's kept all of its leaves. It hasn't dropped a leaf. Produced one rather small crinkly leaf there, but the next one followed on was okay, and the one that's still growing now is okay. Have we got any? There's no new one starting just yet. So suggestions really for those that have had reasonable experience with Renantheras. How do you think I ought to treat this to get some roots to come from the stem? Basically, how do I get this thing to root from the stem? I think it might need to be mounted. My first thought is to mount it with live moss around that stem up to where it is now, just below that first leaf. That way the moss would dry, so it would have a wet dry cycle with air around it. We'll have to see how that goes. Possibly put some rooting hormone around the stem. I've never tried that. I mean, I've got some. I don't tend to use it, but that might be worth a go. Anyway, I was going to say suggestions on a postcard, but suggestions in the comments section, and we'll see what happens. But I'm as I said, I'm about 70% certain it's got to come out of here, because this moss is just staying ridiculously wet. And having had rot on the stem, I don't want to do it again. So it's coming out of there, and it's what to do with it next for the best. So suggestions, please. Otherwise, it might be another one that's not there next time. Now, I don't think this is going to die. It would have done it by now. So I think it has hope, but I need more roots. Right, the little Pabstia, the challenge plant, which I assumed was that it was assumed by the seller, although it was a gift, to actually be a difficult plant to keep going. But we'd had blooms, and what we had was two little tiny new growths, one towards the front on the left of the tag, and a tiny one sort of separated away from the plant on the right hand side. Didn't even seem to be attached to anything really. And that was the sort of state of play. The new growth on the left was producing a few roots, but the plant itself had a reasonable root system. It had taken kindly to its repot and not actually dumped its old root system. It had maintained it and in some cases continued to grow. So the plant had a reasonable root system. It got potted up in the cocoa husk. It's a relative of the Zygopetalum, so it got the same treatment basically as far as the roots are concerned. It's a plant that likes to stay moist, comes from pretty wet areas really. Yeah, so as far as progress was concerned, we'd managed to survive a repot, and we had one pretty good new growth coming out to the left at the front, and one strange looking thing off to the right hand side. So we were looking forward to hopefully getting that new growth to bloom. Okay, well, bearing in mind this plant was given to me as a challenge plant, I think the challenge has faded away to it doing okay, if you see what I mean. I don't see this as a challenge anymore. I mean, last time we looked at this, we had a young growth and a tiny little one here. Well, this one hasn't progressed and is not going to now, so that part of the plant is not going to actually progress. But this growth grew on nicely into a nice healthy shoot and bloomed. So we've got two lovely blooms on here, and they are just that. They're absolutely gorgeous. It's very unusual for an orchid to have that about it. Basically, where the sepals are a totally different colour and have no markings whatsoever, and then the petals and the lip have all the colour and the markings. So that's an unusual looking bloom, but it's absolutely gorgeous. Just the two. There were two last time. I don't know whether it's capable of producing more than two blooms at a time, but we shall see. But the important thing on this was getting a root system, obviously, which it's done. It's got a very good root system on there. And it's still producing new roots from the previous bulb and the current new growth. It's still pushing out new roots. Having got quite a lot, it's still growing some more. So, I mean, I don't know at what point, but at some point in the not too distant future, it should start another new growth. And it may well be the type of orchid that is not going to get that growth triggered until the blooms have finished. Now, obviously, I'm not taking this spike off. It's not a weak plant. It's growing on okay now. Leaves are nice and healthy and everything. So, yeah, so it'll be allowed to finish its blooming cycle. and then as the blooms start to fade we can take the spike off, and then we'll find out how long after that the new growth comes, and then at what point on the new growth do more new roots start. Now there's still room in this pot for another growth. Yeah, it's going to come out from the base of the latest growth. It's going to come out from there somewhere, and the roots will still go straight down into the pot. So there's still enough time for another new growth. Given how much space is around the back of this plant, I obviously misjudged how and where it was going to grow. You know, because this plant could do with, you know, being over towards the label a lot more. But I still don't know how long this cocoa husk lasts. So there would be an expectation for it to be due a repot, not on the next new growth, but the one following that. And the next new growth has got room to grow in that pot. So we'll leave it at that. But I'm pleased with its progress. It'll be interesting to see what this looks like in September. Have we got our new growth? Is it progressing well? Has it only just started? Are the roots going yet? You know, it'd be interesting to see what it does. The blooms last reasonably well, I would say, but not a huge amount of time. I think they were about 6 weeks last time, something like that. Anyway, we shall see. I've got the date that the blooms first opened, and I'll update my notes with when they're gone so that we know how long they last for next time. Okay. I'm pleased with this one. Given that it was given to me as a challenge plant, I was expecting real trouble with this one, and it seems to be doing okay. And obviously with a plant like this, if it is going to struggle in my environment, the most important thing is to have a good root system, which it's done. So yeah, pleased with this one. Now this is a bit special, because this is the first ever Zygopetalum that I've managed to repot and not kill. And not only did it get repotted and survive, the growth produced a good root system on top of the existing root system, which didn't die back. So in this pot is a good root system. Well pleased with that. The growth pushed on and produced 2 good spikes, which I was over the moon at. First time ever I've rebloomed a Zygopetalum. Now, okay, it's a no ID hybrid. I don't care. It's still a Zygopetalum. So this for me was a major triumph, to actually finally get one of these to grow and rebloom. So this for me was a big deal, because I'd killed so many in the past. Enough to think that when I did actually buy this, I'm sure some people thought, oh, he's going to kill another one, what an idiot. But I persevered and got some help. Thank you, Michael McCarthy. Good write-up. All made sense, but I didn't know it before. That's the difference. So, yeah, looking good, doing well, over the moon. Okay, and last but not least is my Zygo hybrid, this is an important plant for me, because it's the first ever Zygo I have managed to repot, not lose the root system, grow a better root system, produce a new growth, and get it to bloom. It was in bloom last time we looked, with 2 spikes on a single growth. So very pleased with the way this has gone. So basically last time we had the new growth with the blooms on. The new growth in the middle of the plant actually rotted, just fell out one day. But where we are now, having taken the spikes off, we do have nice new growth coming that has already started producing roots. So I've banked the media up round the base, make sure those roots don't dry off. And as far as the root system is concerned, it's still there. It even tries to get out the bottom of the pot. And there's signs of branching in the pot as well. Now, they don't show up as much as they did last time round, because they were white last time. Well, unfortunately, one of the side effects of the cocoa husk is staining, because it doesn't matter how much you wash and rinse this, the tannins carry on coming out, probably forever. So, and when you're keeping a pot moist and there's moisture in there all the time, you're actually producing the tannin type coloured stain, the tea colour, all the time. And then when you water it, obviously you flush that through and a lot comes out, but you're leaving some in the pot. So I don't worry about the discoloration on the roots. They still seem to be branching and growing okay. And now we have a new set coming anyway, so that's good. The other thing I'm pleased about is we haven't got spots. We've got clean leaves. So on that latest growth that bloomed, we've got clean leaves. And most of the older leaves are clean as well. So we haven't got the dreaded zygo spotty leaves. I mean, there's a couple. I'll live with that. So it's not a bad plant. It looks really odd because it was potted right over to one side to allow for loads of new growths. It will need repotting before it ever fills this pot. And the pot is quite large. I think next time round we might go for a size down. But, you know, I wanted to try this type of pot with that tiering effect. It's got a massive air cone up the middle. Massive. Almost, well, a third of the height of the pot, if not a half. And I wanted to try this unusual shaped pot. All of these ridges are vented, as you can see. So this has got air coming into the pot from all over the place, which means it dries quickly, which means it gets watered and fed more frequently. Yeah, there's a bonus there. If you've got a pot that stays wet a long time, you don't get a chance to feed it very often, do you? So anyway, I'm pleased with this. We got the blooms, they lasted well, they look good, and they actually got me a first in the tabletop competition as well. So well pleased with that. And let's see what this growth does. I'd expect at least what I got before. And the pseudo bulb will start forming on this growth soon. You know, spikes are gone and everything, so that'll start to swell up and provide some support. And we have a new growth coming. So yeah, good stuff, and the first ever zygo to survive a repot in this place, followed by blooming. So I think we're sort of up and running now. So much so that I've taken a bull by the horns and got some more, which you will have seen in the repotting video recently. So there we go. That's the that's number 6, even though technically speaking at this point in time it's number 4 because we've lost 2. Well, let's see what we can do about that. So there we go then. That was part 4 of update 1. And once this video's edited and put together and posted, I can take the stills ready for next time round, put them in their folders and put the whole lot back onto my backup hard drive and clear the decks basically. And then we can get them all out again in September and do it all again. Again, that will be update 2, parts 1, 2, 3 and 4. And we'll see what's happened, what will be as the growing season starts to slow down September time, although it's still the growing season. You know, we're starting to get shorter days in September, but we still get some pretty good weather sometimes. You know, so there still should be some warmth around, and we haven't got to ridiculously short days in September, so we're not forcing the plants to slow down through lack of light. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the 4 parts of update 1 with its trials and tribulations and some successes. So a mixed bag. We'll see what we've got still alive in September. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by. I keep forgetting to do a joke. Right, we'll have a joke on the end of this one. It's not really appropriate in a project that's got continuing videos, but you're going to get one anyway. Right, if ever you get taken into a police interrogation room, which hopefully you never do, but if you've been a naughty boy or a girl and you end up in a police interrogation room, remember that they record the session. So every now and again you need to go, ow! See you next time.